commercial vessels targeted in the Strait of Hormuz as the International Energy Agency agreeing to release a record 400 million barrels of oil stockpiles to soothe the jitters on world markets. France's president arguing against a return to Russian oil, a sentiment shared by the European Commission president, who says it would be a strategic blunder. Ursula von der Leyen, who spoke earlier before the EU Parliament in Strasbourg. Now, von der Leyen turned heads on Monday when she warned that of a rules-based order that's been put under a further strain by the war with Iran.
But at the same time, these attempts to label today's world mask two tangible and structural realities which are far from important for Europe. The first is that Europe can no longer be a custodian of the old world order, for a world that has gone and will not return. We will always defend and uphold the rules-based system that we helped to build with our allies, but we can no longer rely on it as the only way to defend our interests.
Europe can no longer be a custodian of the old order. That remark drew pushback this Wednesday from some EU lawmakers in Strasbourg.
The question is simple. What is our interest as Europeans? Is it the law of the strongest or rules that are commonly established and that defend our own interests? Even those most cynical, once the bombings have stopped, will once again call for international law and diplomacy. Therefore, we must be uncompromising and unambiguous in respecting and defending international law.
Well, joining us now, she's a former member of the European Parliament for the same Renew Europe group as Valérie Hallier, you heard in that clip there. Sophie in Veld joins us from Ghent in Belgium. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you for inviting me.
What Ursula von der Leyen said in that clip we heard earlier, is it a problem or is she just stating fact?
Well, if you refer to a radical and rapid change of the world order, I think that is stating a fact, where she seems to suggest that Europe should no longer, let's say, respect the international law and the rules-based order. I think that is a big mistake. But what is, I think, more important here is to underline that it's essentially an academic debate, because the way that the European Union at the moment exercises its foreign policies is completely anachronistic. Europe is irrelevant. So all these debates are fairly academic, internal. We should be talking very urgently about how we can have a European Union that speaks with one voice. And then we can also argue about what that voice should say. But for the time being, it's just a cacophony, and we are irrelevant in geopolitics.
Irrelevant in geopolitics when you see the all those European ships now that are in the Eastern Mediterranean and those that are rallying to support, for instance, Cyprus?
Well, they're not European. They're national ships, and there may be cooperation, bilateral or multilateral, between a number of member states or even with non-EU countries, but it's not EU. The European Union is not speaking with one voice. It's actually speaking with 27 plus voices. We see the huge differences between what the Spanish Prime Minister has said, who has condemned the attack on Iran. Then we have the Dutch Prime Minister, who said, well, we condemn it, but or it's not in line with international law, but we understand. Then we have Friedrich Merz, who is wholeheartedly supporting it. The point
He's changed his stance a little since then.
Yes, but the point is, it's not about those individual views, because those views are irrelevant if they don't lead to action. And the point here is that I have a personal view. I mean, I'm more aligned with what Sanchez said than Merz. But in the end, if you have 27 or 28 different views, then basically what you're doing is having an academic debate inside the European Union with zero impact on the world stage. What we are doing now is just commenting each time on the initiatives of Donald Trump. You know, each time we're scrambling to find a common response or something that resembles a common response, but there is no European strategy. There is no European foreign policy. We see that Kaja Kallas is basically, abandoned by the member states. And, in any democracy, of course, there is a plurality of views. That's normal. But when it's about Europe, we say, well, we're divided. No, we're only divided because we don't have a mechanism to decide on a common position. And we urgently need that. We cannot keep talking about, how the world order is changing and how the European Union should become a geopolitical power if we stick to a model that was designed for, at best, the 20th century, but more likely the 19th century.
Let's say there were 25 nations in total agreement. You would still have Slovakia and Hungary.
But that's always the case. There's always, all it takes is one to disagree, and then you don't have a common position. Sorry, this is not workable anymore. And I think it is, the government leaders who were criticizing Ursula von der Leyen, and I'm usually the first to criticize her for a number of things, but in this case, what they did by criticizing her for overstepping her powers was just putting the spotlight on their own failure to agree on anything. They put the spotlight on the vacuum that she stepped into. So rather than criticizing her, maybe they should all sit down together and not leave the room anymore until they have reformed the European Union and at the very least abolish the vetoes in foreign policies.
All right, so on Monday, the European Commission President von der Leyen taking part in a conference call with Mideast leaders alongside the European Council President, who he represents the bloc's 27 heads of state. What you're alluding to there is that it raised eyebrows in Brussels. Politico, which quotes diplomats and lawmakers who criticized what they described as the European Commission President's diplomatic overreach. They have the feeling that she elbowed the EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas out of the way by being the one in the room with those Mideast leaders. You're saying now's not the time to criticize that?
Oh, but that's not the point. Well, first of all, it made me smile because there is a degree of hypocrisy here because the European Council of Government Leaders is now systematically and grossly overstepping its treaty-based powers all the time. So it's a bit rich, but I firmly believe in a clear and robust constitutional framework that is respected by everyone. Now, it is true that the Commission President does not have this role of being, let's say, the top diplomat on behalf of the European Union. That is supposed to be Kaja Kallas. The point is that Kaja Kallas's hands are tied because 27 national ministers or government leaders refuse to take responsibility and agree on a common position. So they're leaving a vacuum, which is now filled by Mrs. von der Leyen. So rather than criticizing her, what they should be doing is talking about how we are going to very, very quickly reform the European Union because it's no longer fit for purpose.
All right, so Sophie
is no longer fit for purpose.
In Sophie in Veld's revolution, how do you organize a response quickly when you have war in Iran, for instance?
Well, it's nice you say revolution because I do think we need a bit of a revolution in the European Union. But no, because it's all going too slow and all this. No, in let's say my ideal European Union, you have a European government, with a European Minister of Foreign Affairs and a European, let's say, Prime Minister and European Minister of Defense. So it's very clear who is in charge. And then, of course, you all consult. I mean, we're still a democratic society, but ultimately there will be, let's say in the current situation, Kaja Kallas would be the European Minister of Foreign Affairs, and she would speak on behalf of the European Union. Now, there may be the European Minister of Foreign Affairs could take a position that I would agree with or not agree with. But that is democracy. I find it, all this insistence on, national sovereignty. Sorry, national sovereignty has also become irrelevant in this kind of situations, because now we're having an academic debate amongst Europeans about what is the better position and who is doing what. And ultimately, it is irrelevant because Trump is doing whatever he pleases anyway. Europe has no strategy. We're only reacting to what he is doing. I think it's pretty disastrous what is happening now in Iran and the Middle East.
You say no strategy. It's true that when we saw last week the German chancellor at the White House, it was laid bare. He criticized the Spanish prime minister in front of Donald Trump. Since then, Friedrich Merz has rolled it back. Today, we heard the Italian prime minister effectively aligning herself with the other big major European powers on this issue. Is that strategy coming together, even though it's being done in an informal way?
Sorry, it's not a strategy. It is just a debate about, how
but
we view
their
the
messaging is
of the
aligned
American
now.
government. Yeah, okay, their messages. I'd like action. European Union should not be following the whole time. Why? If we have a proper, let's say, European government, then we would have our own strategy for Iran, for the Middle East, for many regions in the world. Now we're only reactive. We're only responding or reacting, having an opinion, having a view on what Trump and his administration are doing. We don't have a strategy of our own. And I think that too is leaving a vacuum in the world. So it's high time that the European Union starts talking about, constitutional reform. We need that urgently.
Sophie and Veld, so many thanks for joining us from Ghent in Belgium.
Pleasure.